Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you members of the Smoking Barrel Nation. I'm Rustin Edwards, based here in uh, wet and frigidly cold Geneva with our illustrious comrade in arms, Mr. Matt Stanley. How
Greetings.
goes how goes it, Matt?
A lot better than I was Saturday morning. Let me put it that way. I mean, you have one of those weeks, let's call it, where you are very busy after a long week, and yeah, I slept well the weekend, and yeah, everything's okay. It was a very very busy Bahri week. Shipping community got together. A lot of the trading community got together. Thanks to everyone who came to our forum on Tuesday, which was very well attended. Um, yeah, no, it was a good week, and it's nice. More and more the Middle East is becoming, that fourth hub. You've got all the three main parties, the three main established benchmarks, obviously, Singapore, Europe, Rotterdam, and London, and then you've got New York on the Gulf Coast. But more and more as time goes on, the Middle East centered around Dubai, but others are obviously vying for that spot. The Saudis obviously are establishing more and more that Riyadh is going to be the economic capital of the Middle East. But for the time being, Dubai holds a crown, and it's an extremely busy, I would say, 6 weeks. We've got the Dubai Air Show this week, where the whole aviation community is here in town, and there will be myriad stories written about how many planes Emirates are buying, and Etihad, and the new Riyadh Air, and they reckon like 80% of the spending is going to come from Middle East based carriers. So look, to answer your question, I'm very well, thank you. Much better than Saturday.
So what was the scuttlebutt on the ground during the Bahri week? Any big insights pop up?
No, not really. It's always these things are always great to sort of, oh, hello, mate, how are you? Yeah, not bad, mate. Yeah, how's your year been? Not bad. Could be better, could be, and then you move on. That's the same conversation. Look, I would say it depends on which part of the barrel you are. The freight market is very much very happy, trying to keep it quiet because people are still making money. When the end of that cycle, when it appears, no one's really sure, but everyone for now is very happy. So everyone was out in force. Crude, look, very much everyone was talking about OPEC. The stories are very much a similar story from what they were even during going back to IP week in February. Crude markets looking at always what OPEC are doing. Gasoline, relatively poor demand owing to China, and gas oil, strongest part of the barrel. Fuel or what's happening with the new refineries out in the Middle East. So I would say that the conversation hasn't changed all year, which I think is probably a pretty fair reflection of 2023. It's kind of been a bit, I wouldn't say meh, but I would say it's largely been a somewhat stable year, aside from geopolitical tensions and what is happening. We can't put that throw that into the conversation when it's coming with trading market. But I would say the conversations everyone is having across all books has been very similar to how it was at the start of the year.
Well, I would say when you look at statistically from where we're at now, from where we did start the year at, we started the year off roughly around 83.50, and we're just slightly below that in grand terms. I mean, and from a trading range standpoint, it has been a very much a vacillation around an 83.50 type of mean. We got down to a low of 71, $72, and we got to a high of 96, $97. So it is a bit of a sideways trading year.
It is. I mean, it's funny you say that because, we started our forum last week off with, the question, where do we see crude prices averaging next year? And it was a bullish room. We gave four options: 60 to 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, or 90 or above. And over 65% of the 150 who are in the room all said above 90 for next year. Now, this time last year,
I find that hard to believe when you look at all the analyst forecasts going out for 2024 at the moment, showing that we got stock builds going into this first half of the year, then stock draws second half of the year, which is kind of typical.
yeah.
And people are downgrading how much demand in Asia there will be for next year. So it's a bit shocking that people think $90 crude. So that means that they expect more cuts from OPEC.
No, not necessarily. We just put whiskey in their coffee before they started the forum. So yeah, it's easy. No, I'm joking. It was a bullish room. Look, I think fundamentally, you're right. There will be, yes, the second half, as always, as we explained this time last year when we were doing the podcast, it's always going to be a year or two halves. A bullish first half, and then somewhat of a correction second half this year. That's what a lot of people thought. Now, I think it's done the reversal this time for next year, people's forecasts. But I think you're right. I think that the room was more of the opinion that the Saudis, even though technically they're in recession, will do what they have to do to keep flat price higher. I mean, like I said last week, we anticipate, or our research anticipate, that the Saudis will extend the voluntary cuts of 1 million barrels a day until the end of next year.
Well,
Purely,
and you guys aren't the only ones predicting that as well. I mean, there's a lot of other companies that are also stating that as well.
Yeah, but we were first because we said it 2 weeks ago. But there are people now, because it's hardly breaking news. December, Saudis agreed to extend. Of course they did. Of course they did. They're not going to do anything else. There's no way that they will test the market with more oil when the market is in a very fragile position. We dropped down below to what, 79.20 last Wednesday. The vast majority of the market who were here went, oh my God, when did that happen? Because no one was looking at their screens. But it's, flirting around this 80. I mean, is 80 the next sort of comfort level? Is it we due a drop down? I mean,
well, I mean, it is a case that, all right, from a we kind of said this last week. I mean, you kind of have a ceiling being provided by macroeconomic headwinds. So people, it's very hard for crude to rally, but it's very hard for crude to sell off because you have all the geopolitical stuff going on. One headline from Saudi or from Iran could push the market $3 higher. Whereas the data comes out and that keeps everything on the ceiling. So, are we at a new floor level? I think we're kind of middling in the middle, if you ask me, at the moment in time, because right now you need to have something to drive the market to change the script one way or another. And, you need to almost have overwhelming poor economic data to push the market below 75. And conversely, you need something more overwhelming than just the current geopolitical issues in the Middle East to push the market above 85. And that's why the market sits at the moment. You don't have that new input of information, new input of data to say that, oh my God, it has to go higher or it has to go lower.
What do you think about what Prince Abdulaziz said, that the demand story is absolutely fine? It's just a load of algorithmic nonsense traders who are just pushing the market down.
I think that's somebody just talking his book. I mean, he needs higher prices, so he's trying to make an excuse why the prices aren't higher. I think they're a bit over optimistic on the amount of demand out there. I mean, even Anderon, with his statements that he made on Twitter that, there's just too much supply. Demand is great, there's just too much supply. Well, then that tells you that demand's not so great matching the amount of supply in the marketplace. Because
but he also said that he doesn't expect the Saudis to do anything in terms of bringing oil back or a sort of change in policy until flat price hits 110.
Yeah, which I don't believe the Saudis can do that either, because I don't think they can get to 110 unless they cut more. I mean, I think, especially if you look at the balances going into the first half 2024, I mean, they would have, OPEC would have to cut an additional almost 2 million barrels a day to keep the market balanced.
Yeah.
And I don't think you have the will within OPEC to do so. Now, part of this cut will come from additional new refining capacity coming online, because that's where, a lot of their cut of crude exports has been one thing, but they've been increasing their amount of product exports due to the amount of refineries they have running right now. I mean, I think Al Zour, Jazan, if Dengati kicks off in December, that's going to be Q1. You'll have him removing a certain amount of volume. You have the Senegal refinery moving a certain amount of volume. Duqm. All these refineries remove crude from the market, but replace that crude with product.
Yeah, which should pressure cracks. But I mean, actually, middle distillate cracks have held up remarkably well. I mean, I know we want to talk about gasoline. I mean, it's a nice little segue. But I mean, from a low base, gasoline cracks in the US Gulf Coast increased $2.40 up to $6. So I mean, it's a 30% gain in a week. Now, I know it started at a low base, but I don't know. Is there some Christmas cheer coming for the gasoline market?
Don't think so. I think it's just a case that you had a lull in the market and people took advantage of it, moving up the prices. I mean, there is some demand for gasoline out of the Gulf Coast into South America. And maybe that's supplementing some of the demand flow out of Russia that was going down, that it's no longer flowing. When you look at gas oil cracks, I mean, gas oil cracks are relatively strong. In Europe, there is a fundamental story, the Barron Oil refinery, which, from what I can see, is still having operational issues, and that leaves a 200,000 barrel a day refinery offline in the middle of Germany, which uses a lot of heating oil. And so you do have some support from a fundamental reason, i.e. refineries down going into wintertime. Therefore, you have to move more gas oil into the southern German market.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sort of jesting about gasoline. I mean, going into Christmas time, it couldn't have been much worse. I mean, rapid building inventories post driving season, poor demand seasonally, and retail prices in the US are at 2-year low. So, I mean, there's not a lot to cheer about if you're a gasoline trader.
Well, and it's a case of you do have a lower demand profile that's been persistent throughout the entire year. I mean, I've been banging this drum for a while about the low demand of gasoline in the United States. It never peaked above 2019 levels. It maintained, gasoline demand on average for the year has been almost 6% below 2019 levels, which is a pretty massive downshift in the amount of gasoline demand. Now, EIA contributes that to EV penetration. It contributed also to people are still working from home, which if you look at the ancillary data points around commercial real estate markets not performing so well in certain cities in the United States, you can kind of draw a correlative picture of people working from home, poor gasoline demand, people aren't commuting into work anymore. They're commuting from the living room to their bedroom to their office. So there is that shift in demand profiles. And if you look at the forward projections, they're saying Chinese demand is looking to only grow about 100,000 barrels on gasoline demand next year, which is fairly substantial when you think about the size of that market and the amount of consumers there.
Well, look, I mean, in the Middle East, I mean, let me tell you, in the length of time I've been here, which is a long time now, the traffic in Dubai is an absolute disaster.
Well, that's because you guys brought in an extra 450,000 people that the city wasn't designed to handle yet.
Well, I don't know. We've seen the size of the city. It's fine. There's plenty of space, but we've got COP28 coming up in a couple of weeks here. It will be, I don't know. It will be an irony that no one will be there on time because they're stuck in traffic. And I'm not really sure how to sort of pitch that, considering the UAE have got a presidency this year. But I would say, yeah, okay, there's declining demand in mature economies like the US. But like I've been saying to you for ages and arguing with you, is the market still looking at the mature markets for product demand growth? And it's not.
Where's the population? All right. I mean, you can say all you want about Dubai.
Where's the growing population?
What's the population in Dubai? Just because the roads are crowded in Dubai doesn't mean that the road traffic is not crowded. Like demand is so great. Dubai is its own insular economy, just like the whole GCC is its own insular economy.
Yeah, but it's not to be dismissed. If you look at EU,
I would dismiss it all day long versus that of China, India, EU, and the United States.
I'm not comparing it to those. What I'm saying is that the EU and the US, somewhere that people have always looked at as some kind of bellwether, I don't think are as they used to be. India, China are obviously the two biggest growing economies. Everyone known that for the last couple of decades. It's the places where demand is growing, and that is the Middle East, that is East Africa, that is West Africa, it is Latin America, and that's where the demand growth will come from. It's not going to come from the US. So bearish data when it comes to gasoline demand plateauing, I don't think is holds the weight it used to.
Okay. I would disagree with that, because that's where your consumer economy is. That's where your majority of your cash flow is. India is a growing economy, but you also have a lot of people, people make the assumption that all these new areas of growth aren't going to adapt to the most recent technology. They're going to go with the worst technology available. I think that's a poor assumption for people to make. I mean, if you look at the uptake of electric tuk-tuks in India, as an example, it has become a massive market because people have realized it's easier to run an electric tuk-tuk than it is to run a diesel-powered tuk-tuk. It's cheaper.
No, I'm sure. I mean,
if you have that transformation that happens where people adapt to the newest technology versus oh, I'm going to buy technology from the 1950s just because. I think that's a poor assumption. I think a lot of people will adapt newer technology as they get it, and therefore the petroleum demand will not follow the same rocket trajectory that OPEC has. I think it's going to be more of a mild, if not downward glide plan from this point forward.
Oh no, don't worry. I'm not having for breakfast what OPEC have and the consistent high demand stories. But India again was, October seasonally, with the monsoon season, demand is poor, but it was up 15% last month on what we've got, gasoline and diesel consumption. So India is doing particularly well. But I mean, look, regardless of that, we can argue about this for
Well,
hours.
I mean, my only question to that on India would be how much of that demand would not be there if they didn't have the cheap crude coming in?
Well, we've argued about that all year, of course. Their crack margins, how much the refineries are making, wherever it is, are obviously that much higher compared to other people's feedstocks. Yeah, absolutely. But again, we've said this before. If you are someone who is a net or importer of energy, you go where the cheapest feedstock is, regardless of where it sits in the moral compass.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. That's you have to think about your people before you have to think about anything else in the market at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's look, they're good conversations because I would argue that they're ones that the majority of the trading market aren't having. To say where is product demand growth coming from? It's easier to look at one of our charts or other charts, even though they're rubbish. We're really good, and to think about where to employ your resources going forward. Is it in the mature economies of the EU and the US, regardless of where liquidity comes from? Or is it in the emerging economies, the Vietnams, the Thailands, the Mozambiques, the Ghanas, the Nigerias? That's where people are putting their time, because that's where the middle classes are growing, and that's where demand growth will come from. And like you said a while ago, it's a 20-year-old infrastructure. They're not buying Teslas in Accra. They're buying 10-year-old Golf GTIs because the middle classes can afford it. And that adds to petroleum consumption, which is where the market will then look to sell West African gasoline instead of into US Gulf Coast during the summer. So changing pattern, as you've always said.
Well, patterns will change. When Dangote gets his refinery up and running, that's going to change patterns even more as we move forward into that thing. But let's look at.
Sorry, just on the Dangote, because a conversation that I had last week, which I wouldn't say the conversations everyone had an opinion about Dangote, everyone, and that was whether they're currently in that region, what to do with it, what to do about it. At the moment, there were some people in the room who were saying, I'm not worried about it because it's not going to happen for a while yet. There were some people saying, I'm getting ready for next month because he's going to ramp up. There were some people who are saying the refinery is not even near ready. I'm worried when there's going to be, at the moment on our system. So we obviously monitor the flows, see what cargoes are coming in. There is nothing headed to Dangote, right? It's the 13th of November. Now, whether that's because Nigeria, NNPC will say, right, of that allocation we had to Total for that cargo, that's actually going to Dangote. And that will switch within a day or two. They do hold that card. They do hold that leverage. What the political fallout of that will be with the current partners they've had over the last 50 years, I think is a consideration the market has got, hence the skepticism. But whether they'll be ready, the test runs, whenever it will be, a lot of people aren't thinking it's until at least Q2 next year.
Well, Dangote secured a license over the weekend, announced that they have a 300,000 barrel per day processing license with NNPC now, which one of the pieces of documentation that did not exist, which put people. So now that they actually have that processing license agreement, and NNPC said they have secured 6 different cargoes to go into Dangote directly, which pretty much gets close to 300,000 barrels a day. So I would think that in December, they probably do get crude into the unit and they start bringing things slowly up to life if they're not already starting to plan to do it already. And you won't see it on shipping because it won't be coming via ship.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
At the moment, so the only feedstock at the moment that people are anticipating, because there's no ships giving ETA there or anything like that, it'll only be internal Nigerian supply.
Yes, and which I think politically that it has to be an internal Nigerian supply. I think it'd be a complete upheaval within the country, or not maybe, maybe spark a few protests if there's an import cargo coming in to run a Nigerian refinery versus running local Nigerian crude, because that whole thing was built on the premise of running local crude.
Yeah. Yeah. They own 20% of the refinery. So, they've got skin in the game. Literally, it's just practically whether it can happen. I think the market skip. Some people were saying it will. The vast majority of people were saying it won't. I think that's because the vast majority of people were long in the tooth about trading in that region and consistently being, let's say, known to be to face delays. I personally, I don't know. I don't know if it will surprise to the upside. I think that there will be another delay. I think just from my 20-year history dealing in West Africa, but maybe this is the turning point where it's like, no, we're doing it, and it's December. We told you. They did say in October they'd have products though, and it's now the middle of November, and then nothing came out. I know refineries are always delayed, but that was quite a blatant article saying we will have products. Mark my words, we will have products in October. So look, I'm open either way. I'm not sitting on the fence there, but I am kind of.
Well, I mean, it also comes back to, then you have the Santuma oil refinery up in Tima, which, there was a bunch of fanfare about that starting up in August. Yet I haven't seen hide nor hair if that has actually started test runs or not.
No.
I haven't seen anything on your side.
No. They've got some crude they've imported, but there's no test runs outright yet that we've seen.
But either way, if you get both of those refineries up and running, that does shift the whole balance of the transatlantic trade flow, and it does make it where, how do the European refineries figure out what to do with all the gasoline that they produce, so they no longer have the outlet into Nigeria. Now, one of the interesting aspects of gasoline was that back in the beginning, I think it was in April of this year, the Netherlands passed a law saying that the gasoline exporters could no longer export substandard gasoline to countries that didn't have the same gasoline standards as Europe. They had to export Euro-grade gasoline. And what happens, a bunch of flow shifted over into Belgium refineries in Antwerp.
Yeah.
Now, the Belgian government has just passed a law waiting for the signature of the king to enact the same regulation.
Yeah.
So this is also another dynamic that's changing around, that the gasoline that has to be exported now has to become a proper Euro-grade gasoline, not a diminished grade of gasoline for export out of these refining hubs.
Let me have a look on flow, see how that. Go on, yeah. Sorry, no. This again was a big talking point last week. Let's have a look. West Africa.
Well, it just opens up the case that, do you start seeing some of these, terminals that have been kind of defunct in the Caribbean and in the Azores all of a sudden come back to life, because now they become blending hubs for downgrading gasoline to certain quality specifications, taking care that the export out of the region is on spec Euro grade gasoline, and then it goes to another port and gets downgraded to wherever it is, ship to ship transfers, and then goes off to a third party market at that point. Yeah,
I mean, look, I'm just comparing it. So it came in early start of this year. So the 3-month average of gasoline naphtha exports from Amsterdam and Rotterdam to West Africa was 750,000, 773,000 tons a month. In October, it was 253. Of 160 went to Nigeria. Yeah, look, it's gonna have an effect. I mean, the guys. I mean, let's go Antwerp. See, Antwerp's been largely steady. So October this year, 750,000 tons, compared to a 3-month average of 675. So I don't know what happens. Does that sort of gasoline circus into the West Africa find a new hub? Does it go up to Tallinn? Does it go to, what happens?
Well, I mean, I think what you end up happening is you see a lot, what should either happen is that other terminals, take in this gasoline, gets blended and shipped out, which I don't think will happen, because that adds a lot of extra cost to that type of trade. But you probably will see a lot more STS blending going on, where you'll have like your naphtha component come down on a ship, your gasoline component come down on a ship, And then from there, you'll blend to a third-party ship to go into Nigeria. So you'll do a lot of blending, offshore blending off Gulf of Guinea.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do you think that they'll pass it then?
Oh, I think the law will pass because there's enough incentive that the population, it's that whole cause of, we're cleaning up our act. We're just going to export all of our nastiness to someone else's market who doesn't have the same voice that we do.
Yeah.
Which is an unfortunate mindset, but that's again, it's kind of the I'm going to say it's a green mindset where as long as I have a green atmosphere, I'm fine, and who cares about the rest of the world?
Yeah.
So I think that I think a law like that will pass. I think it will have an impact at some point. It just depends on what the knock-on effect is. Just get through other refining areas in the EU. Do they pass similar rules or not?
Yeah. Look, we talk about West African gasoline for ages, but I think coming into the year end as we are, Jesus, I can't believe I'm saying that, middle of November, Christmas 6 weeks away. We'll probably do a review of what has happened in the year that's been and what will happen in the year that will come, 2024. And I would certainly say the gasoline market in Europe and West Africa is probably one of the most significant items that will be, the most importance for the oil market in 2024. I think will be the gasoline market in West Africa and Europe.
Oh yeah, I think the whole Atlantic Basin will become a different dynamic again. After already going through the dynamic shift with the Russian trade flow, now we're going to go through another dynamic shift with the West African refinery startups, and maybe we'll flatline for a few days or a few years after that.
Yeah, but this is the irony, and this is what I love about the oil trading market, but how quickly everyone in it has to adapt. Now, obviously, what happened in Russia and is continuing to have is just awful. But that was a trading problem. Trading problems usually mean trading profits because people get inventive and find new ways. The gasoline market with the new refinery that can supply, it's self-sustaining for Nigeria is purely a trading problem if you are a European gasoline trader.
Yep, it is.
So I don't know. It's a real one to watch, but I mean, our review will happen sometime in December, so stay tuned.
Well, I mean, we've got coming up, we got some interesting data points coming out. We got US CPI data. We've got Chinese industrial production data, which is going to be something that people are going to be looking at fairly closely to see exactly what is the case in China. I mean, over the weekend, we had the Veterans Day holiday, but we also had what's called Singles Day in China, which is their big push of e-retail sites. And from what the data says, about a 25% growth year on year in sales, 2.5% growth year on year in sales over the platforms, which sounds like it's okay. Not anything to cheer home about, but something that's okay.
Meh.
And we're also coming up into the Black Friday and Black Monday, which is going to be the day after the Friday and Monday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Which is in 2 weeks' time. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all this shakes out in the wash, especially to give a better idea of how the consumers are faring. I mean, you look at all the container ship companies that have been publicly traded that are reporting their earnings. They've all had just dismal Q3s, although positive revenue, but nowhere near the same revenue lines that they had a year ago. Maersk cutting off 10,000 jobs, Hapag-Lloyd making, I think it was 3 billion of EBITDA. Ooh, 3 billion. Oh my God. Sorry to hear that. You only made 3 billion. But, I think one of the most interesting factors from data last week was that the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach had 11% increase month on month of traffic, which shows you that there is, at least in the United States, some restocking of inventory that's going on, which could mean that people are preparing for hopefully a strong Black Friday.
Yeah, I mean, just the shipping question for you, because I know a couple of people have asked us. The current situation with the Panama Canal, right, which is, I think, record low drafts, and there's not as many you can get through, and people are outbidding each other to pay the Panamese? What do you call it? The Panamese?
So there's a reservation fee that you can pay that gets you into the front of the queue. And the 4 million was paid last week for a vessel.
Panamanian. Sorry, Panamanian.
jump through the canal fee. And the whole issue with Panama right now is the fact that it is a drought. Lake Gatun is at a very low level, and the way that the canal works, it's all, the fresh water at a high altitude cascades down through the locks, which then dumps out into the ocean. And so it requires returning rainfall every year to keep Gatun Lake full enough. Otherwise, you can't transit the canal. Now, one of the things that's probably exasperating it this year versus other times that this has happened is that you have 3 lanes of traffic no longer, when you only used to have 2, because they added the extra set of locks to increase the draft and to allow more shipping to pass through the canal. So you probably have much more demand on the fresh water than what it was originally designed for. So therefore, you need more rain to keep the canal full. And I'm sure the engineers will tell you that, oh, no, we planned for all that. We're fine. We're good. But nevertheless, it's resulting in lower transits. So I think they're down to 30 transits a day.
Right.
And changing in the fee structure of how the transits are booked. And so it is adding to the ton-mile story, which is actually boosting dry bulk, LNG freight, LPG freight, and oil freight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking here. There's a sizable number of ships waiting both sides. But let's say, just take it back into what it means for LNG. Say if you're a Japanese buyer of US LNG, which is US probably the biggest exporters of LNG right now, along with the Qataris and Australia. If you happen to wait, say, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be, what happens? People go via the Cape.
Your alternative route, if you're loading in the U.S. Gulf Coast, your alternative route to go to Japan is going through the Mediterranean Suez Canal to Japan, or around the Cape of Good Hope to Japan. And that's going to add an extra 15, 20 days to your voyage.
So what do you do? Does it push up EU gas because they're looking for alternative supplies? I mean, I don't know.
Well, the EU gas doesn't have much of an impact because it's a shorter lead time of supply for the EU. But your Japanese also have other supplies to look at as well. I mean, Qatari gas might what you might see is a change in flows where Qatari gas might just go far east and you get U.S. Gulf Coast into Europe.
Yeah. Okay. All right, it's one to watch. Yeah, it's an interesting one because we've got a lot of people asking us, and it's something. Let's say the ignorant around shipping probably they've read a few stories that what does that mean? Well, it would mean something, because if it means that people are having to pay more for their gas because it's having to come from a different source and people are taking advantage, then it goes to the end user. So it's just sort of one to watch.
But it also does impact a lot of your flow of product into Latin America, because a lot of product that went into the west coast of South America, your Ecuador, Chile, Peru, came from the U.S. Gulf Coast and came via the canal.
Yeah.
And so, those refined products have to now find other routes, and it's probably going to mean your MR and your LR2 rates are going to go up, just because those are going to need to go further around the Straits of Magellan to get to the market to deliver the product.
Yeah.
So it does increase product ton miles, which adds extra strain to the whole clean product freight system because of what's going on with the Russian flows and the extra ton miles there. And so when you start rejiggering these ton miles around the canal blockade, or the canal blockage, I shouldn't call it blockade, that needs something fully different. Sorry, wrong use of English language there.
Don't sue us.
Give me the yellow card on that one.
Yeah, exactly. Just before we wrap up, happy Diwali today to all who celebrate.
Happy Diwali, yes. Happy Diwali to everybody, and hope your celebrations were nice, and look forward to the Thanksgiving holiday coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm on holiday the first week of December, which I'm looking forward to. And my mum arrives on Wednesday for 4 months, so that'll be fun, won't it? Maybe I'll bring her on a podcast and ask her opinion about LNG freight and Panama Canal blockades.
It'd be interesting to get her opinion on what's going on with UK energy prices and how.
Yeah, don't get us. No. This podcast will be 4-hour sessions each one, so don't worry. Love you, Mum.
And as always, there's a lot of people who are suffering in the world today. We've got multiple earthquakes around the world. The most recent one is the evacuation of the Icelandic village because of the volcano that's pending eruption there.
Yeah.
So a lot of natural disasters, a lot of man-made disasters. So please do what you can to support your local Red Cross, Red Crescent, or any other charitable organization that can help people in need.
Absolutely. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
See you all next week, and stay safe and happy trading.
Ciao.